If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedmann.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Today, my special guest is Jenn Grace. She's an award-winning author and founder of Publish Your Purpose, an acclaimed hybrid publisher that's brought over 200 nonfiction books to life. Jenn's mission is to elevate voices often excluded from traditional publishing, especially those from under-recognized communities. A seasoned speaker, consultant, thought leader, Jenn has written 8 books and spent nearly 2 decades helping experts, entrepreneurs, and changemakers share their stories and make a lasting impact through the power of publishing and business-changing books. Jenn, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the show, and thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Thank you for having me. I am very excited to be here.
As we were talking prior to going on the air, we were talking about the idea of marketing strategies that feel natural rather than forced. Talk to us more about that concept, because I know that in your brand new book, and you're going to talk more about that, I'm sure, that you talked about this. So let's start there and dig in. How can we make marketing joyful, blissful, and natural?
I love that question. And as you said, it stems from our pre-conversation. But yeah, I've been in marketing for about 2 decades now in different forms and fashions, with working with authors specifically for over the last 10 years. And what I have found over and over and over again is that before the conversation even starts about marketing a book, someone is bringing in some kind of baggage with them of how they feel like marketing is going to be this really slimy or icky or this misaligned thing that they have to do. And so they're so excited about what they're writing. They're so excited about the impact that it's going to make on the readers. But there's some kind of hang up that occurs between, I want my readers to be impacted by this really amazing work that I'm doing, but how am I actually going to get it into the hands of those readers? And I find that if we can just step back and really just start to assess the lay of the land of how we like to show up, what we love to do, and really start to think about how can we align a marketing strategy alongside that, we can really make this a joyful process. Because if I said to you, Susan, I would love to come up with a marketing strategy for your book, and it's going to require that you were on the local media, the local news, and you're doing videos all day. And if you said to me that I can't stand being on video, it makes me anxious, it makes me nervous, I don't want to do this, that marketing is going to feel so misaligned and so awful to you, versus if I said, hey, what preferred format, what preferred medium and method would you prefer to be using? And you said, you know what, I love being on podcasts, I love being on radio. We could have a completely different strategy that feels so much more aligned and perhaps even joyous.
I love that, because that's exactly the approach that I like to take with my authors, is to find out what they do like to do versus what they don't like to do. I've had people say, I don't want to go out and speak. Great, you're not going to go out and speak, but you could do training, you could do consulting, coaching, going on podcasts, as you said, doing things that feel natural and that you like to do versus, as you rightly said, things that you don't like to do, which are going to sort of stop you in your tracks. And you're not going to move forward with the marketing. That's so, so critical. Now, in your new book, which, again, you're going to talk more about, to Publish Your Purpose, is that you talk about thought leadership and building thought leadership and growing your business. Talk to us more about this whole concept of thought leadership, because people who've written nonfiction books building credibility in their field, building that thought leadership is critical if they want to stand out from the crowd. So what are some of your recommendations?
That's a good question, because I find also that authors have an aversion sometimes to the word thought leadership or to the phrase thought leadership. So in my experience, you have authors that are, especially if we look at nonfiction versus memoir, I think this is where it kind of diverges a little bit. But if you have like a nonfiction author, inherently publishing a book, you're going to get some kind of credibility. Like that is just kind of comes with the territory. But if we look at the idea of thought leadership, I think there's a lot of people who are a little bit nervous or anxious about the idea of moving into thought leadership or calling themselves a thought leader. And if we take a step back and start to look at what does our ecosystem look like? What is the lay of the land? Like, let's just take a real wide view of what are all the things that you're doing in your business, or maybe you don't have a business yet, but you're using this book, maybe it's a memoir, to start something new. Let's really just start to look at what that ecosystem looks like and think about how is thought leadership one piece of that bigger ecosystem. Because when we're looking at how are we going to find readers? How are we going to get our message out there? I think thought leadership looks different for a lot of people. For some people, it could be that they're doing a weekly podcast. For some people, it could be that they're writing to Substack. For others, it could be that they're convening a group of people that they're working with on some kind of consistent and regular basis. And maybe it's not public-facing thought leadership, but it's thought leadership in the eyes of the clients or the people that they're serving. And so I think if we, similar to kind of thinking about marketing and how people a lot of times have just an aversion to the word marketing, I think that there is a little bit of a carryover into thought leadership too, because I do think that sometimes people think that like even thought leadership is overused, but thought leadership can be that you wrote a memoir and you're talking about maybe domestic violence as an example, and your thought leadership might just be that you are hosting some kind of community circle or space, whether it's virtual or in person, for the people who've read your book to feel like they have a bigger community because they can empathize and relate to the experiences that you were sharing. If we really broaden how thought leadership can be, I think the possibilities become endless.
And you're right that the word thought leadership has been overused. And now that I'd said it, I was like, oh, shame on you, Susan. Let's use another word. But it's true. It's that credibility, because what it made me think about, Jen, was that when I first started out in the speaking business, very few people had books. There wasn't that same kind of competition. Now there's an expectation that if you are a speaker, you have a book. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see so many books, especially celebrities or some of the news anchors who want to go onto the speaking circuit. They have to have a book, and those are often ghostwritten. But the fact is that you've got to have this. Now it's just an expectation as part of the business. Yes, now when we're looking at pushing that a bit further, what does that actually mean in terms of you sharing advice, you sharing processes, methods, ways of doing things that makes you, hey, this is the person I want to work with because she knows exactly what they're talking about, and I want to learn from them. So it's that differentiation. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And one thing that I feel like is so understated in marketing is that we focus so much energy on how do we attract the right people, the right readers, the right buyers, the right clients. We don't spend enough time thinking about how do we repel the wrong ones. Because when we show up fully and authentically who we are in ourselves, in all of what that means, we are naturally going to attract the right people and repel the wrong people. And so I think that if we can like really lean into that, instead of trying to be this homogenous mass of everybody is marketing and promoting their books in the exact same way, and every speaker follows this exact formula for how to do it, I think that that gets very cookie cutter, and it gets very boring for people who are trying to decide who they want to connect with. And I think that's the beautiful thing about books, is that you and I could have an identical book There could be 50 other people who all have the very similar books to the ones that you and I have written, but someone's going to be attracted to your style for a variety of reasons over my style or vice versa. And I think if we can really play to our strengths and those sweet spots and the things that light us up and make us happy, we will be so much more aligned, and that will be so much more obvious to the people that we're trying to reach.
And we're going to do the marketing, even though people, as you said earlier, the idea of marketing often is very misunderstood. And I've said this many times, that sales and marketing sort of get pushed together as one homogeneous lump. People don't like. Yuck. Especially authors. We're doing things that we like to do, and we come from passion, we come from wanting to serve. Then you can call it what you want. It doesn't matter. The fact is, you're out there, you're sharing in a way that is helpful to your target audience. And when you do that, and when you come from heart, when you come from passion, from service, there's a whole different approach. And as you say, you attracting the kind of people who you attract and the right people to work with. So, so true. I know you love talking about mistakes, and our listeners love learning about mistakes. What are some of the pitfalls that you see that authors sort of fall into, especially post-launch? Getting ready for the launch, writing the book, getting ready for the launch and everything. And then there are all these fireworks, it's wonderful, parties, whatever you do. And then there's like, oh, it's over, now what?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to mention my book because there's a piece of it that I feel is relevant. The book is called Promote Your Purpose. It's a strategic guide to book marketing for nonfiction authors who want to grow their impact, influence, and income. In my book, I have what I've been using for a while internally with authors that we work with, and we've called it the Aspen Method. Basically, it's a 5-part framework that really kind of brings people through a whole life cycle of marketing. And it can kind of happen regardless of what stage your book is in. It could be that your book's been out for 5 years or your book's going to be out in 5 months. And it's really looking at assessing our platform. So really kind of the A is for assessment. We're just kind of assessing, we're looking around, we're seeing what we have, what we're missing. So that way, when we start to strategize, which is the S, we actually know what we're working with. Then we can move into the planning phase because now, we've assessed, we've strategized, now we can actually do some planning. Then we can start to execute. And I think this is where people start to fall apart, is the execution and subsequently the final, which is the N, which is nurturing people. When we think about mistakes that people make and how things kind of go awry, I think a lot of times people spend a lot of time thinking and they don't spend enough time planning, especially post-launch. Because there sometimes is this misconception that if you write it, they will come. If you publish it, they will come. And we both know that that is not how this works. And I'm sure most of your listeners understand that now, which is why they're listening to your podcast. So when we think about the planning, it's both the planning and then it's the nurturing the stuff that we've already done. So instead of planning that grand book launch, which I've seen some very, very beautiful, very sophisticated book launches that were very expensive, when the author doesn't have a plan for what they're doing after the book launch, like how are we engaging the people who showed up to that launch? How are we getting in front of them again with whatever other offerings or services that we might be able to provide? How are we nurturing them for the long term? Because what we don't want is when we think about our ecosystem, we don't want somebody to kind of just dip their toe into Susan's pond and then be like, okay, I read the book and I'm out. You want somebody who's going to come in and really be engaged by what you have to say and want to stick around, want to be on your mailing list, want to subscribe to your newsletter or be part of your Substack or wherever they may want to be, because you still have more to offer. All of us who are writing nonfiction books, just because we have 300 pages or 200 pages of content, we are so much bigger and broader than that. So I think the lack of planning for the after is really where authors miss the mark so often.
Planning. We need to do more of that. I love that Aspen method, the assessment, planning, strategy, execution, and nurturing. It's so beautiful. How did you come up with that?
What's interesting is that I am an avid skier. My background is marketing, and my publishing company's been around for about a decade, and we've always helped our authors with this. And we have this just a content library filled with information for them to access. But one day I was like, okay, I know that there's a methodology that we're teaching here, but I want to put it into some way that is easy to remember. And so I was like, all right, let me think of acronyms. And I started off with skiing because I'm just such a big ski fan. And so I came up with Aspen. And it's, again, all the stuff that we're using, but it's just easy to remember and it's easy to follow for people.
Very much. I like it. And it's going to be very successful. And I apologize for saying your book incorrectly. So promote your purpose. I think that's much better than what I said.
Well, I do have another book called Publish Your Purpose. So it would make this. Yes,
okay,
I do have
then. So
you're not making things up.
Far off. Okay.
I recognize that I'm causing confusion for myself with things being Publish Your Purpose and Promote Your Purpose. And now I'm like, well, now I need a trilogy. I got to figure out another P word that I can put in here.
There you go.
That's a future me problem.
How about planning your purpose?
Oh, yeah. Very apropos to the conversation.
Yeah. What other mistakes do you see authors make? You and I are both working in this field, and every day almost when I talk to an author, there's something that comes up. What is it for you that you see that these mistakes that get made, and unconsciously most of the time?
I think trying to do everything at once is a big one that I see often, where there is such a sense of overwhelm sometimes when you're kind of coming into this. And again, if you're kind of looking at how someone else is doing it, or maybe you've spent a little bit of time strategizing and planning, and you're really starting to figure out like, okay, these are all the things I want to do. I think a lot of people really spend so much time and effort in focusing on having a successful launch, and they're stressing themselves out because a lot goes into a successful launch, and they have a to-do list 10 miles long, and they don't have enough resources to have people help them get it done, that then nothing happens because they've pushed themselves into a corner of complete and utter overwhelm that they then just kind of stop. I think that is kind of another angle to this too, is like the lack of planning, but then also, and I don't want to say too much planning, but just trying to do too much. And that's why I really try to take an approach of alignment and impact and intentionality. And how can we like really think about what that looks like? Because it might be that you realistically can only spend an hour next week figuring out how you're going to promote your book and what that's going to look like. And if you're going to spend that hour, how do you really make the most of it instead of being like, okay, I have this hour and I have this to-do list that has 75 items on it, and I need to make sure that I get through at least 70 of them. Nothing meaningful is actually going to happen because there's just too much to do. So sometimes we need to kind of like scale back to be more effective.
And I fall into that trap all the time. I think I can do more than I actually can.
That makes two of us.
But it's true. There are so many moving parts when it comes to publishing a book. I always talk about it as like this 1,000-piece puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, and that you have to keep putting the pieces together to see the picture. But it does. There's just so many pieces. And you say you're concentrating on getting the book out there. And then once the book's out there, it's like, okay, now what? And all the marketing. And if you're going to go on podcasts, and there's so many different angles to take that it can be very easily overwhelming. And like you, I always ask, how much time can you devote to this? And let's be realistic in terms of what we can accomplish in the time that we spend together. Because, yeah, if it's only you, there are only so many hours in the day and so much time, energy, and maybe money that you can invest in this. So
yeah,
being realistic is key.
It is, and it brings up something that should kind of precede all of this, is really making sure that you have specific goals set. What does your definition of success look like for your book? Because my definition and your definition might be different. And if we are collectively on the same page of where are we trying to go and who are we trying to impact, all of those other steps and tactics and different things will have a place. Because if I say my goal is to get a high ticket consulting, say I'm a consultant, I'm looking for a high ticket consultant sale here, then my approach is going to look really different than someone who says, I want to get my book into the most book clubs I possibly can. Those are two really different goals. And because they're different goals, different tactics fall under those. So I think that kind of helps too, when you're kind of collectively on the same page about where are we actually trying to head with this.
And what's realistic? Because we were talking prior to coming on the air, I've had authors who say, if I ask them, what do you want your book to do for you? And they said, well, I want to sell 1 million copies. And I never negate that. However, then I question further, well, how are we going to do that? What kind of list do you have? And I've had people say, I don't have a list. Well, okay, so where do we start with selling 1 million books? That isn't necessarily realistic. So let's look and what is realistic? Maybe selling 100, okay, maybe 200 or 1,000. That could be more doable in the short term than 1 million and you sell 2 books and you're like, oh, this doesn't work.
And what's driving that decision for it to be 1 million? Where did that number come from and why? And what might be an underlying motivator beneath the surface that is actually the real driving force behind that goal that actually might be fulfilled by accomplishing a different goal?
Yes. And there's a lot of ego involved. And we both talked about that earlier too, is there's ego wrapped up in a book, period. And then if you want it to be a bestseller, and then if you want it to sell hundreds and thousands of copies, your ego's at stake here. And you don't want to let that ego down.
Yeah. And the reality is that no one knows how many copies you sold in the grand scheme of things more than you do. If you come out of the gate with this big, crazy goal that you're like, I'm going to sell 1 million copies, and when you fall short of that goal, everybody's going to know it. But if you have a goal that is much more meaningful to you, much more purpose-driven, much more aligned, then if you don't meet that internal goal that you might have had, then on the outside, people aren't going to be like, well, she didn't meet her goal again. You can kind of put things in place that can kind of like lessen that hit to the ego.
Yeah, because nobody's checking, or very few people.
Yeah.
I mean, a traditional publisher will check how many copies you've sold if you're looking for some kind of contract with them. But for the most part, you're right. Nobody knows unless I tell you how many copies I've sold. And it's not about selling books. We're not in the business of selling books. We're in the business of transformation, of serving people, of making changes in this world. And that's what's critical, I believe. And I know that's your thinking as well, correct?
Yeah.
Putting words in your mouth here.
But they are accurate words. And it's part of the reason how I ended up in books to begin with, because I was a consultant and I had written a couple of books. My goal for those books was that I had clients who needed that information. And then as I started doing more books, I had a lot of people saying, well, how did you know how to do it? I'm like, I don't know. I just figured it out. And gradually that turned into my publishing company. I was doing a keynote speech in Milwaukee. I was standing on the stage and I was thinking like, if I were the person who's actually behind the scenes helping other people get on the stage that I'm now standing on, my impact could be so much bigger than me just traveling across the country being on stages myself. When we think about kind of impact, and every reader is that point of impact, and they can be a catalyst for your impact to spread to somebody else. And so it really isn't about numbers on a spreadsheet that's like, oh, I sold 6,000 books this quarter. That's not the point. The point is you changed 6,000 lives, or you helped 6,000 people do something differently that helps make their life better.
And you don't always know the impact that you have on people. The fact is that you're putting the information out there, and if it's solid information and you're passionate about it and they feel that, you're impacting, you're influencing, you're impacting people, you're inspiring people, but people aren't necessarily telling you that. Doesn't stop you from doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things as an author that I always find kind of makes your brain hurt sometimes. I caught up with a friend earlier today that I haven't seen in 7 years. And she had mentioned that she just finished reading my memoir that came out 5 years ago. And I was like, it's just so trippy sometimes to think about of like, oh, wow, like that person is using their free time to read something that I wrote and I don't even know that they're reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And like to think about like how intimate, especially a memoir, how intimate an experience that is. And, just to think about like how many other people are reading any of our books at any time and how kind of mind-boggling that is to think about.
Yes. I remember people coming to me maybe 2-3 years after they heard me at a presentation, and they said, oh, you said something that changed my life. When I asked them, well, what was it that I said? Because I have no clue, something I said 3 years ago. I don't even remember what I said 5 minutes ago, let alone 3 years ago. They can't necessarily remember, but still they had that feeling, oh, you made an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, whatever I said or whatever I did had that impact, and it made a difference for them. And that's what was important. What it was at this point doesn't really matter, but they felt that it was something for them. And that's what it's about.
And that was such a cool thing about being an author and helping authors is that we get to experience it from both sides.
Well, this is a great segue, Jenn, for you to tell our listeners how they can find out more about you, the upcoming book, the previous books, the ones that I don't know the exact titles of books.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that there's two things. So because we're on a marketing podcast, if you go to promoteyourpurposebook.com, that will give you information about the book. But I also have a Substack called Promote Your Purpose, and I am writing weekly to it where everything is wrapped around promoting your purpose and wrapped around the Aspen method. So you can go in and like, if you're thinking about, what are some things I can execute today? There's a whole kind of section of just the E in Aspen. So I think those are probably the best two places. And then I am all over the internet at Jenn Grace. So I'm fairly easy to find.
Yes, because I had to look you up too, and I found you very easily.
Yep.
This has been amazing. Thank you. And as you know, we always have our guests leave our listeners with a golden nugget. You've given us so much already, but I'm just going to squeeze the lemon a little bit harder.
I think my golden nugget, and I don't want to infringe on Nike's trademark, but just do it. Whatever the thing is that you're thinking about from a book promotion and a marketing standpoint, even if it terrifies you because it feels bigger than what you feel like you're capable of doing, or even if it feels like it's too small, whatever the thing that just right now while you're listening to this, just kind of in the back of your mind that you're like, oh, that's the thing. Whatever the thing that's popping up for you in this moment, that's the thing to just go out and do. Because the more that we go out and consistently do the thing, the more momentum we can create and the more lives we can impact.
And the easier it gets.
Yes.
And we're all about making things easy. So yes, just do it and just keep doing it. Mm-hmm. And don't try it once and say, well, that didn't work.
No, you got to keep at it. It just magically become super simple overnight. You really just got to put in a little bit of elbow grease.
So true. Words of wisdom. Those truly are. Thank you. And thank you for sharing so much of your great wisdom, and can't wait to get into the book and check out the Substack. So yes, you and I have got the Substack going here. Love it.
Thank you for having me. This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And listeners, if your book isn't selling the way you wanted or expected to, let's you and I jump on a quick call together to brainstorm ways to ramp up those sales, because you've invested a whole lot of time, money, and energy, and it's time you got the return you were hoping for. So go to bookmarketingbrainstorm.com to schedule your free call. And in the meantime, I hope this powerful interview sparks some ideas you can use to sell more books. Until next week, here's wishing you much book and author marketing success.